If you look at history books, the Second World War lasted from 1939 to 1945, so for 6 years. But in today's episode of Write Your Own Story, I want to tell you a true story about a soldier whose war didn't last 6 years. His lasted 30. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Write Your Own Story. My name is James Taylor. I'm an online counsellor, hypnotherapist and life coach. I'm also an author, a podcaster and a YouTuber. So, who was this person whose war lasted for 30 years? His name was Hiroo Onoda. And what had happened was, he was an intelligence officer, and he'd been tasked with being involved in a bit of an invasion on an island in the Philippines called Lubang. Now, a lot of the people around him were killed, and him and only 2 others were left on the island. Everyone else had gone. But before everyone else had gone, and he was now the most senior officer, his commanding officer had given him an order. You can't surrender. You must kill as many of the enemy as you can. You are not allowed to kill yourself. That was his order. And what he did, he lived by that order for the next 30 years. Now, the war had long since ended. And when the war ended, planes would fly over Lubang Island, dropping off leaflets saying the war is now over. But Hiroo thought this was propaganda, and he refused to buy into it. And this went on and on and on, and he lived off the land, occasionally killing animals or maybe getting in disputes with farmers and killing a few farmers on the island. And he became known as this mysterious figure who was still living on the island, believing the war was still going on. Jump forward to 1974. There was a man called Suzuki, and he went on a bit of a mission himself. He went on a mission to find a panda, find a yeti, and find a soldier who thought the Second World War was still being fought. He found Hiroo. Now, when he spoke to him, Hiroo refused to believe this. He thought he was being lied to. This is not true. And Suzuki said to him, "What would you need to believe and know to believe me? What would need to have to happen?" And he said, "Well, if my commanding officer told me, then I believe it." Suzuki travelled back to Japan in search of Hiroo's commanding officer. He'd long since retired. He was now working in a bookstore. And hearing the story of how Hiroo was still fighting the Second World War in his world, he travelled back to Lubang Island and he confronted Hiroo and said, "The war is over. You can now come home," which he did. Now, you may wonder, that's a terrible tale. What's it got to do with this channel? Well, it's this. Hiroo had an identity. His identity in his world was, I'm a soldier and I must fight in this war. And in his world, the war was very, very much still alive. But the world had moved on, but not for him. He'd remained in this world, following orders, following instructions. Now, if we apply this to ourselves, don't we all do this to some degree, one way or another? We have instructions that have been given to us, and some of them we disregard, and some of them we follow. Now, these could be instructions that don't harm you at all, or they can be instructions that very much do. So what are the ones that wouldn't harm you? It might be eat 3 meals a day, try and get 8 hours sleep, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs, work hard, study, apply yourself. They may be ones that, they're the instructions, they're the rules, the orders, the commands that we live by, and it doesn't really cause much chaos. But what about if we've been given some instructions, some orders from voices from our past that could cause chaos? Now, the kind of things that may exist for some is, where men don't cry. You've heard that one? What are you crying for? Stop being a girl. If that's said to a boy, that's got to be an order. That means really, and it's implied, men can't show their emotions, which is complete, as we all know, I hope, complete rubbish. But what can happen is that boy can turn into a teen, can turn into an adult, can turn into a man, can turn into a pensioner, and still hold the belief men don't cry. Men don't talk about their emotions. Do you see the harm that could be done? What about another instruction from way back when? A woman's place is in the home. Look at the harm that would do. That means that a young girl might be told this lesson by one of her family members perhaps. She turns into a teen. What's going on around her follows that order. And she will grow, potentially, into a person that thinks, it's not for me to even consider having a career for myself. My role, my only role, is to have children and to stay in the home. Now, you may think that's okay or not. The point I'm getting at is, if the order is held on for too long and it's a wrong order, it can cause chaos in our lives. Let's pick another one. Let's say someone is growing up and they're being told, don't expect to have a happy relationship. You don't deserve the best looking person in the room, whether it's male or female. You don't deserve it. They're probably going to look at other people who they're attracted to and think, they're out of my league. They're not for me. They're up here and I'm way down here. There's no way I can bridge that gap. Now, here's the beautiful thing about it. Unlike Hiroo Onoda, it doesn't have to take 29 years to get past this. What you can do, you can get help by working with someone else. Someone who knows what they're talking about, maybe a therapist, maybe a life coach, to sort of undo those knots that have made up a blanket of orders that you've been given in the past. This is life-changing stuff. Because when you start disregarding a previously given order that was incorrect, you start making different choices. And then you start making different decisions. When you start making different decisions, you'll probably take different actions. When you take different actions, you'll get different results. And this can be like night and day when someone does something like this. If this kind of thing interests you, and you might look to want to maybe get rid of some of those old orders, those old commands, those old beliefs, my contact details will be in the description for a free 30-minute consultation. So this is just the bizarre story of the 30-year soldier. If he'd have realised his error, he would have been there just for 6 years. But for 3 decades, part of his life gone forever. Bizarre. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, please do the like, the share and the subscribe. My name is James and this is Write Your Own Story. Bye bye.